This talk, entitled Blocks to Healing Part 2, was given by Ruth Ann Kramer at the Training in the Ministry of Healing course, Minnetonka Baptist Church, Minnetonka, Minnesota, September 1998. The talk and this tape is copyrighted by the Kramer Institute of Apple Valley, Minnesota. All rights are reserved.
Okay. This is Blocks to Healing Part 2. Now I'm going to speak of 5 additional blocks, how they effectively block healing, and give some real-life examples. So I'll be telling some stories. I love to tell stories. The first block is pride, a different kind of pride than Matthew is speaking of, and 3 ways that pride causes a barrier to healing. The first way is that pride raises up in the person's mind the estimate of self. We think of a prideful person as being conceited, self-satisfied, self-important. The lifted chin, the nose in the air of looking down on others. Isaiah 16:6 says it well. We have heard of the pride of Moab, how very proud he is, with his haughty, arrogant insolence, that his empty words do not match. Christian pride, however, is usually far more subtle, even hidden, especially if one wants to be seen as good or holy and knows that outright evidence of a lofty view of self is not seen as Christ-like. Still, it tempts us, since we fell for the lie in Genesis, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. Widespread pantheism and New Age, especially among Christians, proves our vulnerability. A special note: we think of pride as only believing oneself to be above, to be better than others. But pride is a centering on self, whether it be on our goodness or our badness, on our worth or our lack of worth. Self-pity, self-censure, self-castigation, while seeming to stem from humble self-assessment, is rooted in pride, the centrality of self. We think of someone who's prideful as thinking they're the best, but you can also have pride thinking you're the worst. It's the centering on self that is pride. 35 years ago, I would say to my spiritual director, I'm nothing. He'd say, you mean you feel like nothing? No, I'd say, I really am nothing. And he'd say, is that humility with a hook? Meaning, are you saying you're nothing, so I'll come back with your something? Thank God, I've come to know who I am in Christ Jesus. In a meeting we were in of people in healing ministries, and one person said to another, oh, you're so humble. Well, the other replied, I don't think I'm humble, but everybody says I am, so I must be. The second point about pride is that pride blinds. Pride not only elevates our worth, centers both positive or negative thoughts on self, but as our inner vision is occupied and filled with self, whether good or bad, pride blinds us from seeing others and others' needs, even their attributes. Blinds us from perceiving broader truths and realities. We can't see beyond the center of ourselves and so we become deceived. Obadiah 3 says, "The pride of your heart has deceived you. You who dwell in the cleft of the rock, whose abode is in the heights, who say in your heart, who will bring me down to earth?" This is a scripture thought of as pertaining also to Satan. Third point, pride can be stubborn. Stubborn, unapproachable, touchy, and offensive pride refuses to concede or even consider, and it raises its own almost impossible barrier. A barrier not to God's giving. After all, he knocked Paul off the horse when he was filled with arrogant aggressiveness. But it becomes an obstacle, a hindrance to one's ability to be openly receptive to receive. So God wants to bring healing, but the person in their stubbornness is keeping it out. Sirach 10:12, the beginning of pride is man's stubbornness in withdrawing his heart from his maker. Pride causes us to pull away, to pull back. Stubbornness reinforces pride, making it more deeply entrenched. A barricade, a block to relationship with God and others, and a block to receiving God's healing. God can overcome it, but many times God just allows us to keep it because of our unwillingness. If we would allow even a chink in the stubbornness, then God could move into it. But many times he allows us to enjoy the fruit of our choices. God comments on pride in Jeremiah 13:17. He says, "If you do not listen to this in your pride, I will weep in secret many tears." Sirach 7:17, "More and more humble your pride. What awaits man is worms." We've ministered to a number of Christians blocked by pride, and they are most memorable. A woman came to us for physical healing, and when she called, I said, "Well, now, are you sure that this is just physical healing? Because for regular healing, we always book at least 5 hours for the first session. But for physical healing, we'll maybe block out 1 hour." So she said, no, it's physical healing. Well, when she came, she had it all orchestrated. And she wanted to be healed the way she wanted to be healed. And this is the way we were going to do it. And she demanded, I'm talking about pounding her fists. She demanded that God heal her because, after all, God knew she deserved it. That she'd always been a good person, she obeyed all the rules, and now she was miserable, and God owed her healing. Our discernment and gentle prodding unleashed her anger and bitterness at him. Now, we counseled that she must first let go of these before she could receive healing. Well, she refused, and she pounded her fists some more and demanded that we heal in the way she ordered. Her husband intervened, saying, "Listen to these people," and she told him to butt out. Finally, we anointed her for physical healing, but mired in self-righteous self-pity, she grew worse, accusing us of not doing as she directed. And for the first time since 1970, Matthew ceased the session and opened the door. Now, Jack and Jill came to us on the verge of divorce, trying to keep the marriage together for the sake of the children. Jack said he had been weak in the past and allowed his wife to run things because it was easier and it let him off the hook. But now he wanted to face his responsibilities and assume leadership in the family. Maybe he went to Promise Keepers. But he said his wife wouldn't let him because she had pride. That Jill would not admit she did not believe that she could do anything wrong. Jill said she was perfectly capable of being the leader, that he had been weak, that she couldn't and wouldn't trust him to lead or to make decisions. She would not relinquish control. The marriage would continue on her terms or not at all. We sensed that Jill really wanted to let go, to be led, protected, and cherished. But her father, an autocratic dictator, determinedly raised her as a son. She became what he demanded: strong, perfect, invincible, and impervious. She moved from her father's control, married, assumed control in her marriage, and would not relinquish or even share it. Through numerous sessions, we assured Jill that God stood ready to heal and to bring the marriage to the fullness of his intentions. But for Jill to say that she needed or wanted help or to change would mean that she'd been wrong, not perfect. Her values and her paradigms would not let her. The marriage failed and the children floundered. The second block is a lack of faith. Now, this is not the gift of faith as I spoke of earlier, but basic faith in God and what he can do. And there's a lot of confusion in the healing ministry about the whole area of faith. People will say, I guess I'm not healed because I don't have enough faith. Sometimes we who minister, especially when we face what seems to be an impossible case, are tempted to believe that we haven't enough faith. What is the role of faith in healing? Christian faith is believing without seeing. Though I cannot see, I believe. Though I do not behold with eyes, nor experience in mind, emotions, or body, I believe. Now, this is an important thought here, too, that I think will clear up some of these difficulties. Christian faith is not hope, and it is not trust. Faith dwells in, springs from the heart or human spirit. It springs from knowing the one in whom I have faith. From knowing the one in whom I have faith, proceed hope and trust. I can feel hopeful and trustful and have strong expectations. They are only expressions of faith. Sometimes we have hope and trust thinking it's faith, but when it really comes down to it, we waver, and that's because the faith isn't solid. Faith pertains to unprovable invisibilities. With so much manipulation of reality today, it's hard to accept what we haven't seen, heard, or experienced. Our culture says I'll believe it when I see it. The scriptures reverses the order. First we believe, then we see. God asks us to believe in two invisible realities: God and His Word, sight unseen. 2 Corinthians 5:7. We walk by faith, not by sight. Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the substance of things to be hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Now, true faith is so real, it's a substance. The Greek word means that which stands under something else. It takes us behind the visible to the underlying reality. It enables us to endure, to press on, to step out and minister. Faith is a believing we have now. Hope, on the other hand, is expectation that looks to the future. Faith is now. Hope looks to the future. God says hope based on true faith will not be disappointed. Faith is confident assurance, that is, now, of what is hoped for, future. And conviction, now, of things we do not see, but will see, future. Verse 6 says, without faith it is impossible to please God. For anyone who comes to God must believe God exists and rewards those who seek Him. If faith is a necessity, in whom or what does God say I am to believe? In the old law, God said, believe in me. Jesus came, then said in John 6:29, this is the work of God, that you believe in the one He sent. Many times to work for God, we look for some great work or ministry, but God says, my Son sits enthroned at my right hand. Your work is to believe in my Son. Come to me through my Son, obey Him, and love and minister as my Son loves and ministers. Hebrews 10:38, Paul says, we are not among those who draw back and perish, but among those who have faith, present, and will possess life, future. We believe, present, and expect, future, we will be rewarded. So don't be deluded into thinking because you're hoping or trusting that you have faith. Hope and trust is based on your faith in a person. And out of that relationship with that person, you will come to hope and trust. Now, Jesus Christ promises that if we believe, that He in turn will bring us into relationship with the Father and the Holy Spirit, so that we might have life. We can't have relationship with someone we have no faith in. We can know about God, but do we believe in Him? A lot of people think, well, I've got all kinds of knowledge, maybe graduate degrees or whatever, and they think that that is a faith life, but it's only knowing about Him. We can know the scriptures, but do we know the reality of which they speak? Paul emphasizes in Colossians 1:22-23, hold fast to faith, Be firmly grounded and steadfast in faith, unshaken in the hope promised, future here, by the gospel you have heard. That includes Christ's command and provision for healing. Now, faith grows and matures in our spirit, that deeper innermost place. We cannot think faith in our minds. We might think some holy thoughts, but it isn't faith. We can look, learn, and reason things out, but this is not believing spiritually. We cannot feel faith. We can feel emotions that respond to faith or accompany faith or cause us to question or deny faith, but emotions are not faith. Feelings based on emotional experience are not faith, and all ecstatic or mystical feelings must be scrutinized and discerned. We cannot will faith, make ourselves believe, or make faith happen. We can tell our will to respond to inner convictions. Faith is meant to guide our functions as persons, including bringing and receiving healing. 1 John 4 and 5, the victory that conquers the world is our faith. That's an amazing statement. Ephesians 3:12, in whom we have boldness of speech and confidence of access. How? Through faith in him. Faith is needed by the one seeking healing. Romans 4:19, he did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body as already dead. The minister responds to the faith in the one needing healing. It's awfully hard for somebody if they don't even believe in God, but many times people they say, well, I want God to heal me, but they don't even believe in him. And yet they're asking something of a person they don't even believe is real. Acts 14:9. A man lame from birth listened to Paul speaking, who, looking intently at him, saw that he, the lame man, had the faith to be healed. Paul shouted, stand up on your feet. The man jumped up. Even Jesus was affected by this principle. He says in Luke 8:48, daughter, it is your faith that has cured you. Mark 6:5. He could work no miracle there, speaking of Jesus, so much did their lack of faith distress him. God responds to faith, though not always in the way the sick person wants. The person must believe that Jesus Christ can heal and does bring good. Sometimes what seems to be a yielding to the will of God, it must be God's will that I suffer, may really be a lack of faith. Now the third block I call hanging on. This is hanging on to the sickness. And this is best illustrated by 3 stories. Karen was severely crippled with arthritis, but as I ministered to her, I sensed that she did not really want to be healed. As her story came out, it seemed that early in her marriage that her sportsman husband spent his free time hunting and fishing, leaving her alone many weekends with small babies, causing her a sense of abandonment, deep resentment, and a belief that she was not worthwhile nor important enough to receive his time and attention. But when she became sick and crippled, he had to stay home. And if she were healed, she reasoned, he'd go back to his old ways. I can't tell you how many times this happens. If I'm healed, life is going to change. And I don't know if I would like the change that's going to come about. Another woman had a very crippling disease. She was obviously bitter at her husband, who was there waiting on her hand and foot. She refused the prayer, saying that she was bitter at him for years of business travel and making money, she told us. And she teased that now retired, he would have to spend his time taking care of her. Laughing vengefully, remember that, darling? She said, now it's my turn to claim all his attention. I'm his cross till death do us part. We were in the church vestibule at the time. I'm his cross till death do us part. And I just, what could you say? Now, Sarah was a young woman with a number of children. She had one child who was greatly deformed. In fact, so deformed that it was written up in the science textbooks. And she could not give her husband or her other children the necessary love and attention. Her husband came with her to the ministry. And when it came right down to it, she refused to give over the deformed child's care and future to God, saying, God won't take care of him like I can. Her life was defined by tragedy. Tragedy was her identity. She had lost her identity as a woman, wife, and mother. And she cannot forgive God and let go and let God. So we were not able to bring healing to her. We had to minister to her husband, but she refused to give the child over to God. The fourth block is inner trauma. We all have need for healing of deep hurts and traumas that may not be remembered consciously, and this is important, but nonetheless afflict, block, shape, harm, impact, even paralyze us unknowingly. We think like Jeremiah 10:19. Woe is me! I am undone. My wound is incurable. Yet I had thought, if I make light of my wound, I can bear it. Rationalizing, accepting, bearing up or putting up with inner trauma and wounds does not heal them. But don't we often think that? Well, if I just bear up and go on and, Memories and responses to inner trauma actively affect how we think and feel, even though we think we're handling it very well. And the ways we behave, how we see and treat others, how we believe they see and treat us, and particularly the decisions we make. Now, Joe and Mary came to us, and we were very surprised because they were known for marriage retreat work all over the world. And they were the ideal couple with many lovely children. And they surprised us by asking for counseling. Joe was threatening divorce because Mary would not do the laundry. The laundry had piled so high, there was no room left in the basement. The children had no clean clothes. Mary was running up charge accounts, buying new clothes. And Joe said she was either being stubborn and rebellious, or she just didn't love them anymore. both of which Mary tearfully denied. She loved Joe and the kids. She wanted to do laundry, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. As we ministered to her and prayed, the Holy Spirit prompted us. I sensed terror and panic. Matthew, in an inner picture, sensed a cold, dark place. Mary began to shake. She experienced fear, but could not remember why. Matthew sensed trauma of being closed in, trapped. We kept ministering to her, probably took a couple of hours. The Spirit brought to Mary's mind a terrible event. She and neighborhood children played in an empty lot. They found an old trunk and took turns locking one another in it. While Mary was locked inside, a mother called for the children to come home. Forgetting or mischievous, they ran home, leaving her locked in the trunk until after midnight, when police found her cold, traumatized with terror, believing she'd die and never be discovered. Now, what did this have to do with laundry? And Joe, immediately defensive, said, "The basement is not a cold, dark place. I put in windows and new lights, I painted the walls, I put down bright linoleum, it still didn't help." We asked Mary to recall how she felt in approaching the basement. She realized that she felt dread. She had to force herself to go down, and when down, felt trapped, closed in, and could hardly wait to get out. So if she was experiencing that every time, then she would find something else that was more important to do. Evil was using her childhood trauma to keep her trapped in fear and bring disruption and chaos to her marriage and family. In prayer, we asked Mary to see herself in the trunk, that God was there and she hadn't known it. She must forgive the children. Oh, that was hard for her to do. She must renounce the harassing spirits of fear, panic, and terror and break their hold in her life. We prayed for a healing of the memory. She would remember the event, but no longer suffer the effects. This is what healing of memory means. The next day, Mary called, "I'm healed. I'm doing 10 loads and having a great time." Another example of how childhood trauma can affect an adult's behavior. Aunt Therese was physically developed early. She suffered molestation by her father, relatives, and her parents. Feeling deeply betrayed by her parents, especially her mother, who did not protect her, she believed herself of no value except as an object of lust. Lack of esteem and fear of men made her unable to deal with attention in healthy ways. Marriage did not end the unwelcome advances. She resolved that she would make herself fat, unattractive, make others see she was more than a body. Then, later, trusting that she was now old enough or married enough to be safe, she would lose weight. After again attracting unwanted attention, she'd regain weight. Health suffering, she had to end the seesaw loss-gain and accept her attractiveness as God-given and ask God's healing to deal with unwanted attention in a healthy way. The fifth block are inner resolutions or vows. This is so important. Almost everyone at some time in their lives have made an inner resolution or vow. Most vows made are unrecognized, unknown, or hidden to us, usually because we make them at such an early age or before we're fully matured. Most vows result from anger, hurt, disappointment, betrayal, abandonment, or humiliation. Some examples: I resolved never to love anyone or anything again. You can't imagine how often we hear that. I will never open up. I will never make myself vulnerable again. No one will ever humiliate me again. I'll always be the first one to leave a relationship, etc. You can probably think of some. These deep resolutions become so much a part of us that we don't remember making them. Though every time a similar situation occurs, we renew, reinforce them even stronger, ever deeper. I can remember making a vow because it seemed like every time I let somebody's love in, I'd get hurt. I'd say, I made a vow, I am going to love out. I'll be so busy loving out that nobody will ever notice that I'm not letting love in. Because every time I let love in, I get hurt. So I'll just love out. And we became known for our love until we had Susie come and stay with us. She was in very, very bad shape. And one day, and I was trying to talk her into letting our love into her so that the healing process would happen. She looked me right in the eye, and she said, well, you asked me to do something that you're not willing to do. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, you want your love to come into me, but you won't let my love come into you. She had nailed me. She nailed me. She saw through me. 1 Samuel 2:8. He gives to the vower his vow. Ooh. Ooh. The Lord does not intervene to break that which we have made. Rather, we must give up. Renounce the vow. God does not wrench it from us. We've ministered to many adults who have been hurt or taken advantage of in teenage years by the opposite sex, who as children or teens vow never to let another man or woman hurt them, or even get close enough to hurt them. As adults, they sublimate or forget the vow and can't understand why inner walls keep them from fully disclosing themselves or letting others get close. Betty came to us. She was twice divorced. She had an ongoing battle with men. Her relationships never lasted, she said, and with authority. She often quit jobs or got fired. Growing up, she never knew what her father would do. An alcoholic, his behavior was erratic, physically and emotionally cruel. No children ever pleased him. Her mother behaved as a doormat. As a teenager, Betty made a resolution. I'll never be like my mother. No man will dominate me or tell me what to do. She yearned for loving relationships and meaningful employment, but only on her terms. Growing more cold, bitter, and inflexible, she was domineering and anxious, an uptight, nervous wreck. She had no trust in man or in God. Wouldn't they all be erratic and cruel like her father? Didn't they all have to be manipulated and controlled? This is classic adult acting out of an inner vow made because of childhood trauma. I'd given a healing day for women pretty far away from here. And at the end of the day, I was trying to minister to each one. There were maybe 65, 70 women there. And I could see Helen coming, the tears streaming down her face, and the Lord just kind of gave me a picture of the torment that she was experiencing. And it turned out that she wanted to get close, but she never could. And she was about 48 years old. And she was deeply sorrowed because she longed to marry and have children. And during the day of healing, she came to see that she had made a vow as a teenager. She realized that she'd been hurt in a teen romance, and she'd made an inner vow. And ever since then, she had sabotaged her relationships. And now she felt helpless, hopeless, and angry and bitter. She was full of regret because she felt she was too old to realize her dream of marriage and children. She couldn't understand why God had shown her before. Now, God can heal these very deep traumatic memories and wounds once the inner vows are renounced. But if they're not renounced, Betty wanted a magical thing happen that would make her close to a man again. Well, she had made this inner vow. And so you're asking God to come against something that's deeply entrenched and that we've made of our own free will. Men make similar inner vows in response to hurt or betrayal. And this is a funny story. It's my last one. An executive in a powerful position in a national company appeared at the door of Cristo Rey in his black three-piece pinstripe suit, carrying his black leather suitcase. He looked so good. And he stated that he was there to learn how to love, and he'd heard that ours was the best place to learn it, and he was moving in. So, I mean, there were 20 others there. I mean, he might as well. He could find a bed. He told us nothing of his background or his circumstances. After 9 days of him seldom being there, due to the demands of his executive position, I sat him down and I explained that the Lord had given me a sense that he held within him a very strong block to loving, that he had erected a wall that allowed no love to come in or go out. And he erupted, "You've been talking to my wives." I assured him that I hadn't even known that he was married. As I counseled him, I perceived that he'd somehow been deeply hurt and in retaliation had set up the wall. As I questioned him, he remembered quite bitterly that in high school he'd fallen hard for the beauty queen. She cruelly rebuffed him in front of his peers. I sensed this was when he erected the block and asked him what he then did. He said, "I said to myself, no female is ever get to me again." No wonder his marriages failed and would keep on failing unless the block of that inner vow was removed. I told him that if he wanted to learn how to love, which was his stated reason for living with us, he had to forgive the beauty queen, renounce the vow to demolish the wall, and with God's help and healing, open himself up to risk again. That God stood ready to bring him the healing, strength, and courage he needed to love and be loved. Instead, he grew incensed, saying that he'd come there only to learn how to love. If he wanted to be psychoanalyzed, he'd pay his shrink $250 an hour to do it. He packed and stomped out. Later, when I told Matthew about it, Matthew said, "Why didn't you run after him saying, 'Wait, we'll charge, we'll charge'?" If persons have made vows, resolutions not of God, we need to lead them to renounce the vows, break down any walls or obstacles they've built, and determine not to let the vows affect them again. Because the next time, and you can be sure, God or evil is going to bring in a situation in his life where that's going to be tested. And we need to pray for the healing of the memory that caused it. If you don't ask God's healing into that memory, then they'll still have the same response. He needs then to come against and take authority over any evil that accompanied that. Now, why work to remove blocks to being healed? Because God stands ready to bring us into the full life that Jesus Christ intends us all to have, and that we in turn might open others to the healing, wholeness, and full life that Jesus won for us.